So what do you think about the Green Deal? What is your take on the Green Deal, and how do you believe if we are going to succeed it or not? So I think that, first of all, we shall think that we shall not be too easygoing about this concept, and we shall not be complacent. Why am I saying this? Because there is an ongoing discussion on the Green Deal, what it is, what does it mean, and what is sustainability, and how it is going to have an impact on the final producer who will have to implement this Green Deal initiative. I think we shall not be overambitious. In this case, it turns out the ambitions have been set really high. The goals have been set. The program has been signed off, but this ambition calls for consistent changes in the lives of the people. But these ambitions shall not be too frightening and too wide-scoping, and therefore we shall not confront each other. And this discussion is a very all the more relevant and very much timely. I'm the chair of the Rural Affairs Committee of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania. In this committee, we have been discussing about all the rules and regulations applicable for us in Lithuania. Well, the good news is that the European Commission has finally made its mind that it's up to the member states on the way forward to set the goals that have been set for us. This is also bad news at the same time, because this leaves a lot of room for interpretation, the way we understand it, the way we see them, the way we believe things need to be done. And unfortunately, it is not always reflecting the situations on the ground, in the countryside, in rural areas. Over the past year, I have participated in a number of conferences myself. And I remember one of them, and then was an interparliamentary conference organized by the Polish Parliament on the green strategy. I remember there was also a similar conference by the Portuguese Parliament, the European Parliament, along with the national parliament. Also hosted a discussion with the Rural Affairs Committee. So I believe that all of us are seeking the same goals, and we want to achieve our political agenda goals. All the measures that have been foreseen to be implemented by the people who will have to face it and deal with these measures, these people shall benefit from the relevant assistance or financial support. Well, speaking about Lithuania, I believe that in terms of the distribution of the funds under the cap, if 25% are to be dedicated to the green initiatives, a person may choose not to opt for such 25%. What I mean to say is that people should be interested in availing of this 25% of additional bonus if they're going to implement the green deal initiatives. I think that we shall talk quite a lot about the fact that we are amidst the activities which have to be continuous. First of all, we have some historical background where we stand now, and the Lithuanian history in our context is as follows. Animal husbandry, it used to be our advantage maybe for the past 100 years. Unfortunately, it has been going downwards, and I believe we can't speak about green initiatives by leaving animal husbandry aside. A second thing is that from a historical point of view, during our independence years, there has been a very high level differentiation among the farms. We have very small or micro farms, others turned into medium-sized farms, whereas we have also very large farms as well. Unfortunately, this differentiation is as it is, and we have to live with that. In terms of the small farms, I think we need to say that they will the majority of small farms would no longer be economically viable without any financial support. We may even call them a social, some sort of a social farming, because at the same time, we shall not forget the people. There is a fraction of people who live in the rural areas, and the farm is the only way of subsistence. So, having in mind the greenhouse gas emissions and all the other Green Deal initiatives, we shall always have the people in mind. So, in terms of continuity, this intensive, I would identify the ecological or organic development plan and farming in less favored areas. I could identify the following sectors, which are the priority for us. Now, moving on to the production. I think that intensive farming or intensive production farms have all become such because they had all the knowledge, all the necessary knowledge in order to make the developments and the transformation happen. And the goals that we're going to set for large farms are going to be also easier to be achieved. Whenever we talk about our social partners, we always emphasize that if there is a certain measure, it has to be financially supported. For instance, we haven't stopped talking about the use of manure or sludge. Luckily, manure is no longer considered as waste, it is considered as fertilizer. And it took us 10 years to change our mindset. So far, we still have a road to go before we use the manure 100%. So there are challenges, how to promote animal husbandry, and at the same time, we have also to use the waste, which is no longer considered as waste, the manure, which is considered as fertilizer. So it's both a challenge and an opportunity, and the sequestration of carbon into the soil is the path we shall follow. In terms of our future objectives, they should be very much in line to the European goals, which is a carbon neutral economy. And for that reason, we are building and developing ecosystems to allow the people to choose the way forward in order to achieve the goals set under the Green Deal initiative. And these rules and regulations should very much reflect our possibilities. The possibilities are always reflected by what our producers say. And this brings me to where I have started from. Ambitions are usually political ones. And when it comes to practical implementation, these are the producers who have to achieve these ambitions or to put them into practice. So we should strike a balance between these two. Animal husbandry and development of animal husbandry, I could hardly call it the development, because I believe that over the past decade or so, this sector has shrunk by 1/3 compared to its previous levels. I believe that there is still some room for further development in animal husbandry by way of introducing some organic husbandry principles. The background of shrinking animal husbandry were also destroying the meadows. Just to give you an example, if a farmer decides to phase out animal husbandry production and by way of preserving a meadow, a farmer would get 50 euros for preserving the meadow. Does he really need 50 euro if he may have rapeseed crops instead and get this financial support in hundreds of euros? So we have to think very carefully when we introduce one or other support measure, so that the farmers are no longer more or less living on the verge of bankruptcy. I remember that the Danish agricultural minister
tūkstančiai,
in one of the
turbūt antras
conferences
punktas jos
said,
kalbos ir
and
buvo
the
apie tai, kad
paragraph
draudamų
2
sąskaitų
was that
neturėtų
we
būti
shall not
ūkininkų
have the farmers on the verge
bankuose.
of bankruptcy.
Tai
That
toliau
was her
apie
idea
gyvulininkystę gal
in
tai
the
yra labai
speech,
platus
in her
klausimas,
speech.
ji yra labai įvairi.
Whenever we talk
Tarkime,
about animal
viena iš
husbandry, we
gyvulininkystės
can
šakų
always
vakar yra
approach it
pateiktas Seime
from a very
projektas
broad
uždaryti ją.
perspective.
Ta, kuri yra mažiausia, ta, kuri yra visiškai
Yesterday, we heard an idea in
galėtume
the
sakyti
Seimas
žiedinė ekonomika, nes
proposing
iš jos nėra
of
jokių
cutting
atliekų.
down on
Tai
animal
yra
husbandry
kailių
because it
žvėrelių
is
auginimas, bet
produces
ambicija vėl ateina iš
certain
kitur
ways. For
ir
instance,
ta ambicija, kuri bando
yesterday we discussed in the
sugriauti
Seimas the initiative of
legaliai
banning
veikiantį
the
verslą. Tai
fur
vienas iš pavyzdžių, kaip politika
animal
gali
husbandry.
įtakoti visiškai priešingų tikslų pasiekimo.
And by the way,
Todėl
these goals may have
neturėtume
a completely
labai
different
vienašališkai žiūrėti į visus tuos
consequences.
dalykus.
So we shall always
Toliau
be much more broader in
pakalbėkime
our
truputį apie
thinking.
bioįvairovę,
In terms of
vandentvarką ir žemdirbystę.
biodiversity and water
Ne
treatment and
paslaptis,
agriculture,
Lietuvoje apie
these
60
areas, it is
procentų
no surprise to
žemės
anybody
ūkio
that
paskirties žemių
60% of all
yra
agricultural
nusausintos,
lands
nusausintos
in
uždaru
Lithuania
drenažu.
has
Daugiausia,
been
turbūt
drained
didžioji
with
dauguma, 95% tų
dry
žemių tokiu
drainage
būdu nusausintos.
system.
Ir dabar mes kalbame apie
And
tai,
now we start
apie
talking
atkūrimą
about
upelių, kurie tekėjo
restoring
prieš
the
100
brooklets or
arba prieš
rivulets that
50
used
metų
to run
kažkokia tai
through these
kitokia vaga.
meadows
Tai vėlgi
hundreds of
žemdirbių
years
požiūris
ago.
yra labai
So from a
aiškus.
farmer's
Taip yra
point of view,
sistemos
the
dalinimas.
situation
Mano
is very
požiūris į
clear.
tai
That would be
yra,
a destruction
kad
of the system.
nusistovėjusios
I believe
ekosistemos
that
šiandien
the
gadinimas,
long-standing
bandant atkurti tai,
ecosystems
kas
and any
buvo istorijoje.
disruption of
Jeigu jau
long-standing
kalbėti apie istoriją, tai gal reikėtų
ecosystems,
kalbėti
just for
tada
the
ar
sake of
apie Vytauto
preserving the
laikus, ar apie
historical
Smetonos laikus. Vytauto
justice,
laikais
then we
buvo
can
gal
go
kokie
as
10
backwards to the
procentų
history as to the
miškų,
times of the Grand Duke of
Smetonos laikais
Vytautas,
buvo tik
or to the
16% miškų,
I
ir
remember
čia
that
galime
in
sugrįžti
the
prie
times of
miškininkystės.
President
Miškininkystės
Smetona, we had only
plėtrai dabar
16% of
miškų dabar yra
forests.
apie 33%
Nowadays, we
Lietuvos
have
teritorijos.
33% of all
Pagal
the
Lietuvą
Lithuanian
tai yra
territory
labai daug,
covered by
nes po pirmojo
forests,
ir po
while
antrojo pasaulinio
on a
karo buvo
national
likę
scale,
tik
it is
16%
quite a large
miškų,
scale.
tai dabar yra dvigubai daugiau.
Nowadays, we have double the amount compared to the pre-war level of forestation. And nowadays, when we start talking that we shall further expand the land covered by forest up to 40%, I do understand that we may regard this 40% as an ambitious goal, but that would be at the expense of some land that could be used in active production. So who could agree to use the available agricultural land for forestation purposes? Few words need to be said about invasive species. Whenever we talk about the climate change, and I believe this is a fact, and we have a lot of invasive species which are encroaching upon the usual habitats, and we have very few measures to control their prevalence. And at the same time, there is a huge prevalence of invasive species and a list of authorized pest treatment chemicals, which is much shorter. So if we want to have a very well-nurtured nature and at the same time to have an appropriate amount of food, we shall always strike a balance between those interests. And let me complete my speech. I saw who is participating in this conference. I see that the people are the ones who are choosing the digitalization path and into the innovations. Innovations should also come to the agricultural field. And so I would like to wish everybody all the possible success for the participants of this conference. And thank you for your attention.